financial planning is not just a cookie cutter, but as financial advisors, we work with people to make sure that they have a plan in place.
Okay, because we can't hike Mount Everest by ourselves.
No, and what you would prefer is a Sherpa, someone that has done it time and time before you. Stephen and I and other financial advisors have retired hundreds of people.
Stephen and Brooke, I recently came across a stat that talked about how 50-year-olds in America, less than half of them have more than $1,000 saved for retirement.
It's a major issue. Unfortunately, right now in the United States, the vast majority of Americans just are underprepared for retirement.
Okay.
And too many of them are relying on Social Security to bail them out. And with the cost of living, with inflation, it's just not going to keep up in the long term. People are living longer.
Yeah.
Family dynamics are changing. They're not having multi-generational family households anymore. And so, yeah, we're going to be running into a significant issue in the future as more baby boomers retire without adequate assets for retirement.
Okay, so as we look at this, and we know that it's an issue, but we still have, as Americans, we feel that cost of living increase. How do we do that, right? Pay for groceries, pay for all of our needs, and still plan for retirement and invest and do all of those things? What are your thoughts?
We have all been living and grown up in this society of living the American dream of I want a new house, I want a new car, I want to buy the home that I was raised in, and I deserve all of those things. And I think, not only is inflation going against us and living longer is going against us, but we want what we want, and we want it in a very early age. And we're just not living in a society that people are willing to budget, think about what's going to happen 30 years from now. I mean, when we wanted to rent a movie when we were younger, we had to go to the video store. Like, oh, it's not here. I guess I have to wait. No one has to wait for anything anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think, some of that sacrifice early in life to maybe not have what I want, but have what I need is not something that's abided by. And it needs to be for people to be able to save for retirement.
Okay, I love that. So as we're going along this journey, right, to retirement, what are your thoughts? How do we prepare? Obviously, there's thousands of things we all could probably do or do differently, but where do I start?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that many people look at retirement planning, where you start, they look at it like running a marathon.
Yeah.
Now, Kristalina, you could probably tell I've never run a marathon. Brooke has.
I have. 1 out of 10 would never do it again. I don't recommend it.
Because I have no plans to.
Good.
But is retirement a marathon?
Well,
that we're all going to not want to do and fall along the way and fail?
That's a good question. I don't think it is.
Okay.
I think that the better example with planning for retirement would be like hiking a mountain. Okay. Now, Kristalina, when you go out hiking, what's the goal for you when you go out and hike a mountain?
To get to the top at sunrise and enjoy the view and, right, have that sense of sublime and being in nature.
Yeah, and that is why people hike mountains.
Except you would be wrong.
Yeah.
It's not to make it to the top.
Brooke! Good grief. It's not to make it to the top.
No.
Okay.
Well, you want to make it back down. You just told me you have kids and a family. You got to make it back down to them, right?
Yeah.
So,
true.
yes, we want to make it to the top. But if we make it to the top, we actually want to make it down to the bottom, too. Yeah. Return home.
Make it home, get to your car, get back to your family.
Okay.
And so with that, we've always talked about, or we've used the analogy that with financial planning, it's like hiking Mount Everest. Now, with hiking Everest, that may seem like a daunting task that only a few people have ever done. But if you really look at it and you break that apart, Mount Everest, it was first climbed back in 1953. And since then, there's been over 4,000 people who have attempted to climb Mount Everest. And I say attempted because they all haven't made it home. There's been over 300 people that have just that perished. They haven't made it down the mountain safely. And if you look at that, the statistics tell us that about 70% of those hikers that go and attempt to hike Mount Everest, they die on the descent. They make it to the top. They see the view. They see that they get to plant the flag, but they don't make it home. And what we're seeing is that a lot of Americans, as they are planning for retirement during their working years, they're just not doing enough. We talk about the ascension side of retirement planning as you're climbing up the mountain, that, Kristalina, you got to start early. You got to start putting money away. And that's those working years.
Okay.
Then there's this really crucial part where you get to the summit, where you get to look out and look at the scenery for a few minutes, that retirement party. But that summit, there's some important things that you have to start transitioning and doing differently than what you've been doing for the last 30, 40 years while you were working.
Okay.
And then there's the dissension side. There's the retirement side where you have to change your focus, your spending habits, your goals. And if you can do that successfully, you're going to make it home. And so financial planning is not just a cookie cutter. It's not a simple answer for everyone. But as financial advisors, that's what we do, is to work with people to make sure that they have the right tools, that they have the right equipment, that they have a plan in place, and that as financial advisors, they have a hiking crew, a support team to be with them throughout that journey so we can get them home safely.
Okay. Because we can't hike Mount Everest by ourselves,
No,
No.
we can't.
right? It's not possible. I
No,
would
and what
say.
you would prefer is a Sherpa, someone that has done it time and time before you, that knows the terrain, that knows the pitfalls, the areas that people have issues, which, most people retire one time and it's their first and their last. But Stephen and I and other financial advisors have retired hundreds of people. And so we get to be, along with your CPA and your banker and your estate attorney, we get to be your Sherpas through your Mount Everest journey.
Okay, I love that. So we're not alone in our journey, right? So let's start maybe with our ascent and starting our hike, if you will. Where do I start, right? So for those maybe just starting out in their career, and then those like myself who the top's closer than I would like it to be, maybe, right? What does that look like? What are my options?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, to contribute to any of those wonderful vehicles that we talk about a lot, 401ks, IRAs,
Yeah.
403bs, 457s, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, all those numbers, letters that are jumbled together that we say, yeah, we think that's retirement. First and foremost, you have to have earned income. If you don't have earned income, you have no capacity to contribute to a retirement account. And so that's the number one thing.
Okay.
Second to that, 401ks. 401ks are a underutilized tool that we have at Mountain America, right? We are lucky enough to work for an employer that offers a 401k. Oftentimes in those 401ks, I can't tell you how many people we meet with on a daily basis. They're like, what do you have in your 401k? I don't know. Okay, when did you start it? How long have you been contributing to it? I don't know. I've worked at the same place for 30 years. And when I started, the neighbor next to me in the cubicle or the HR person just said, hey, just sign up and do the match. I'm like, well, good thing you listened, because you have $500,000 in that account now. And so
Awesome.
there's just things, again, 401ks, IRAs, to go back to our Sherpa analogy or a Mount Everest analogy, you have Sherpas along even when you're 20. So, HR people for your 401k, a financial advisor, right? They have options for you, but it's about gathering that hiking troop to help you make wise decisions in regards to what vehicles are accessible to you and how to use them. I did management for 10 years before I came to be a financial advisor. And I would lose young kids to, a construction site down the road, or to, something that they just wanted to do different. And I'd say, hey, why are you leaving me? What didn't work out? And they'd say, oh, well, they're going to pay me $1 more. Okay, I probably could have paid you $1 more, but you didn't ask. But tell me, have you asked the HR person or the person hiring you about benefits? Oh, no, I didn't ask about benefits. Okay, well, do they have a 401k? I don't know. Do they offer a match? I don't know what that is. I'm like, oh man, we think about young kids having all the decision-making capacity to make a right decision, but they don't even know what to ask. And so again, hopefully you have a parent or a loved one in your life that can walk you through that. But if you don't, a good reminder to young kids is to work, live within your means, and find the right team or the right Sherpas to walk through it with you. Because 50-year-old you isn't thinking about it, right? Or will be, but 20-year-old you isn't currently thinking about it.
Yeah. So is 20 the age we should start? What is that like ideal age, or is it just whenever you can?
That's a great question. There's that old story of, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Well, it'll be today. I was grateful that when I started with Mountain America 16 years ago, I had a financial advisor. I was just a part-time teller. Had a financial advisor that came, kind of took me under his wing and said, Stephen, what are you doing for the future? What's your goal? You're going to school. I'm sure you don't want to be a teller forever. What's your goals? And so I started talking through my goals and what I wanted to accomplish in my life. And he asked me about our 401k. And I was 21 years old. I wasn't going to contribute because I didn't think I'd be here long enough. 16 years later, I have been.
Yeah.
But he said, Stephen, you've got to start contributing. Start early, and be consistent. And so I started putting money into the 401k. Mountain America, thankfully, was doing a match, as many companies will offer a match. And now, years later, because I invested appropriately, I was consistent, and I started young, I have a substantial amount of money set aside for retirement, and I'm grateful I started. So the question, when do you start? As soon as possible.
Okay.
You just have to be consistent. And you're right, life is really expensive right now. Inflation, it's beating people up. And yet, I know if we look at our budgets, if you really go and do a deep dive of where you're spending your money, there's places you should be able to find that you could eliminate, change some behaviors, some habits. And even if you're only putting away $20, $50, $100 a month or every couple of pay periods or weeks, you got to be doing something, because like Brooke said, that 50-year-old you will be grateful that the 20-year-old started somewhere.
Okay, I love
Grateful
that.
the 20-year-old, didn't buy that cup of coffee or the 7th subscription to Netflix or YouTube that they didn't need. That goes a long way.
Yeah.
Omitting a couple of those things, $25, $50, $75, $100 a month, that's powerful in retirement.
What's interesting is individuals that we work with, that they're in their 30s and their 40s and their 50s. They've been able to set aside a lot of money into this retirement nest egg, and they're really proud of it, and they're doing great. But then you have outside sources and influences and things that are scaring them, like market volatility, elections, global geopolitical events. And a lot of people get really fearful, and they want to pull their money out of the market. They want to change what they're doing. When the markets dip, if my wife walks into a store and sees that everything is now 50% off, what does she do? She buys 2 pairs of shoes. And so you can't let outside influences and things impact your investing decisions. You got to be consistent and just keep putting money away for the future.
Stephen and Brooke, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I've learned a lot from you. Hopefully you've, learned from each other, and hopefully all of you who have joined us have learned as well. And we will see you on the next episode of Guiding You Forward.